Welcome to the Gospel According to Star Trek podcast. I'm Kevin C. Neese.
And I am Scott Higa, and you are listening to episode 67, where we'll be reviewing Picard's Season 2 premiere, The Stargazer. We will start off with some Star Trek trivia questions.
And then we'll find out who wins Star Trek trivia right after our main topic, discussing Star Trek Picard Season 2, Episode 1, The Stargazer. It's going to be a great conversation. Stay with us. Well, Scott, you're still here.
You keep inviting me back, and I'm beginning to think... I'm worried that the internet thinks I am blackmailing you in some way. That the only reason this guy continues to be on the Gospel According to Star Trek podcast is that he has some long buried dirt about Kevin. That he actually doesn't like Star Trek at all.
No.
He's just in it for the fame and the fortune, and that's why he's committed his life to this examination of the Gospel and Star Trek.
Well, you've blown it now. Get off the show. Oh, boy. No, for those of you who didn't hear our last episode, Scott was our guest as an old friend of the show, old friend of ours from Nerd Circles, and the host of the Christian Nerd podcast. And we had him on the show a couple of episodes ago as our guest, and we needed a pinch hitter this week, and we just said, well, hey, Scott's good. So we called him up, and here he is. 2 episodes in a row. Well, 3 total, but 2 as a co-host. So that's pretty cool.
I'm very excited to be back. And mostly I'm excited. Like, I enjoy Star Trek Discovery, but as I shared when we were talking about the Christian Nerd, I grew up on Star Trek Next Generation. So when they announced Star Trek Picard would be coming, I was over the moon.
Oh, yes.
And very, very excited to start watching season 2. And now to have the opportunity to talk about it with you, I'm very, very excited.
Yes, me too. I am too. But before we get to that, we've got to do our Star Trek trivia. And I have taken over Mike's game show hosting duties, and
you're doing a fabulous job at it.
Oh, thank you very much. I have, you can't see it, but I actually have a long, skinny microphone. I know.
I was like, you're a regular Dickie Dawson, just waving that microphone around, but you're much less creepy than he is, which is great.
That's good. I promise not to kiss you. And everybody who's too young to get that joke, hey, look it up. Anyway, so all right, here we go. We're gonna do this. All right. This is a Deep Space Nine question. Actually, you know what? Let's go all Next Generation.
Okay.
We're gonna go with all Next Generation questions because this is a Picard show. You are a Next Generation nerd. We're gonna see what kind of Next Generation nerd you are. Okay?
I'm ready. Though I missed the one Next Generation question we had last time.
That is true, but we'll see how it goes this time.
Okay.
All right. This one, we'll see. Number 1. What court-martialed Bajoran came to serve on the Enterprise under Picard?
Got it.
All right. Got that one down. Okay.
Yep.
Now, who was the most renowned archaeologist in the Federation in the 24th century? And I'll tell you the answer is not Picard or the Ferengi he met on Risa.
It was the Horgon. The Horgon was the
Horgon. Dr. Horgon. Let's see.
This isn't right, but I'm going to put it.
All right. You ready?
Yep.
Last one. What disease did Barclay have named after him? Let's see.
Those are hard.
Yeah, those are hard.
I take it back. I like Mike better. Mike's questions are better.
I had one, and then I thought, no, I think I'm misremembering, so I changed it, and we'll see.
Yeah,
we'll see if I'm right. But anyway, okay, all right, we shall see at the end of the show.
Locked and loaded.
Answers locked in, and now it is time, to discuss Star Trek Picard Season 2, Episode 1, The Stargazer. Please tell us, Scott, how you felt about this episode.
I started crying when Captain Picard, Admiral Picard, Commandant Picard, Chancellor Picard, Admiral. I started crying when he walked into Guinan's bar.
Oh,
It was tremendous and wonderful and amazing. And I'm very excited because I live near Los Angeles and they're doing a pop-up of Guinan's 10 Forward in Los Angeles.
no.
So I get to go visit and
Oh.
hang out. I'll be sure to send you lots and lots of pictures.
Oh,
So I'm very excited
that's
about
so
that.
cool. I am
So-
so flipping envious.
Yeah. I mean, I love Captain Picard. I think he's tremendous. He's my favorite captain. He was my best friend growing up because I didn't have any friends, but I had Star Trek Next Generation. So anytime to revisit Picard is so good. And so
Oh, yeah.
I thoroughly loved the first season. It gave me closure for things I didn't know I needed closure. So I was really interested to kind of see where they would take it. Because at the end of season 1, everything's great. Picard has this kind of ragtag crew aboard La Sirena. It's like, oh, what's gonna happen?
Right.
And then I was not expecting a hey, let's get the band back together episode. But I enjoyed getting the band back together. I enjoyed kind of seeing where everyone had gone, and that, you know, Picard seemed to be in a much better place at the beginning of this season than he was at the beginning of the first season. So yeah, I enjoyed it thoroughly. But if I'm going to be honest with you and your listeners, there is no way I was not going to enjoy this episode. If I'm just being honest, I was going to enjoy it no matter what.
That's probably true. You know, I will say I love that Guinan's bar is called 10 and it's in the Forward District.
Yep.
That was beautiful.
Perfect.
I loved this episode. I enjoyed it so much. I felt like I enjoyed season 1 of Picard. I really did.
Yeah.
I had my problems with it. I had my things that there were so many like heartbreaking deaths that some of them I felt were unnecessary, and it didn't do what I wanted it to do. You know, when the pieces started coming into place about, you know, Data's daughters and Bruce Maddox and all this stuff, I thought, you know, it's gonna be going this direction, and then it went completely the other direction. I just felt like, in some ways, season 1 of Picard was there to just dash all my hopes. But at the same time, it was really, really great. And I'm right now listening to Una McCormick's novel Last Best Hope, which takes place before season 1. And I also listened to the audio drama with Michelle Hurd and Jerry Ryan that takes place between season 1 and 2. Which is really good. I recommend that. And so I'm interested in all this stuff that's sort of surrounding the seasons, and that's really helping to, you know, deepen my appreciation for them. But this season premiere, this episode was so great because it felt we had these characters who were in place from season 1. We have Jurati, we have Soji, we have Seven, we have Rios, you know, all these folks who we met last season who are now playing pivotal roles in this season as well. But we have Q and we have Guinan and we have more about Picard's history, and it just felt more like what I really deeply in my nerd heart wanted from season 1, which I still loved season 1, but there were some things that it just felt a little disconnected, and I missed some things, except with an episode like Nepenthe, which is the best episode of the season. It's just gorgeous. And by the way, I got to write a review of that episode for Trektember, for David's Real World Theology. It was such an honor to get to do that episode because it's the best. But this episode was so glorious. I have to say, one of the most satisfying things in the whole episode for me was when Q showed up and he looked younger and then he snapped himself older. That is exactly how I would have done it.
Yes, so great. So perfect.
It made me so happy. But let's get into the various elements of the episode, where Picard is, how he starts out, how people have grown and changed since last we saw them. What did you think of all that?
Yeah, I think that it was... So I didn't like how they started the episode. I'll just say that, kind of with, look, someone's attacking everything, and then they jump back 48 hours earlier
Yeah.
I would have been just as happy if they started on the chateau and beaming grapes up. That's crazy. Technology
Awesome.
is so insane. It's like, yeah. And again, I have lots of questions about how the economy works in Star Trek. Who buys do you buy the wine? Do all the people hanging out at the winery just do it because they love wine? Lots of questions about how money works in the 24th century. But that being said, I just said it, right. I loved seeing Picard in a much better place, right? He wasn't this pariah. He wasn't running away from everything. He's the commandant of the academy. He has a job. He has a purpose. He has his pips back. And so I loved seeing that part of his life growing and pushing forward. But then we see this part of him that still remains kind of stuck where it's always been. When, Laris gives him a longing glance and he gives her a longing glance, and they're sitting enjoying a glass of wine on the last day of the harvest. And, he leans in to kiss her and he just stops himself. And the next day Laris says, well, you are who you've always been. Like, that's just who you are. And so all seeing Picard in a much better place than he was at the beginning of last season, but then still seeing that, he's still Captain Picard. He still has these blocks up around his life, around his heart. And he says that, I haven't been able to chase the things I want because I've had to follow duty first. Those interactions with Laris, his conversation with Guinan, gave us so much more about Picard as a character. I didn't think we could learn more about Picard after 35 years. After all those episodes of Next Generation, after 4 movies, after entire season 1 of Star Trek Picard, I was floored by kind of where I think they're taking this season of unpacking his trauma with his father, right? And I saw somebody, tweet out a video of when the episode you guys were talking about of Where No Man Has Gone Before, where Picard sees his mother and he's super excited and he's so sad that he can't talk to her, like he's on the floor. And then in Tapestry, when his father shows up and there's disdain and there's anger, and the fact that they saw that in those 2 episodes separated by 6 seasons, and they bring that into this and they decided that's the thing. That's what drives Captain Picard. And the fact that we're finally learning what drives this man who's done such amazing things in the Star Trek universe, somebody that I respect, that there's leadership books written about the Captain Picard leadership method, right? We get to see what motivates him and drives him. Finally, I didn't know that I wanted that. And the fact that that's what we're going to get, I'm amazed. I'm so excited.
I loved it. And it actually, from what I understand, the very little that I understand, it actually connects with Patrick Stewart's own history in terms of having, conflict between his parents, and I think abuse by his father in his home growing up. And so seeing that, and like in the first season, you had number 1, the pit bull, who was Picard's dog. Like, where's number 1 right now? That's what I want to know. But
he was there.
Was he there?
Yeah, he was.
Oh yeah, he was there.
He was
that's
out
right.
there
That's right.
when Picard was
with him.
grapes.
That's right.
Yeah.
I remember now. Okay.
Just a nice little pit bull hanging out in France.
But like pit bull rescue is a big passion of Patrick's. And so little things like that from Patrick's own life are getting intermixed with Jean-Luc's life, and that's so fitting and so right. And it works. Like you said, it's not completely out of nowhere. It's rooted in these very brief characterizations that we've seen of Picard's parents within Next Generation. And that's fine. That's fantastic. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see how that's unpacked. If you watched The Ready Room, did you watch The Ready Room?
I did. I really need to watch more Ready Rooms because I haven't watched any Ready Rooms.
Oh, dude, I'm such a fan of The Ready Room. There have been times when, like, we talked last episode about Star Trek making us cry. Like, there have been times when The Ready Room made me cry more than Star Trek did. Oh my gosh. So great. Will Wheaton is doing a fantastic job on that show. And he interviews Patrick, and Patrick talks about the fact that memory isn't always reliable, and so we're seeing a version of Patrick's of Jean-Luc's history, when we see those flashbacks. And I'm really interested to see how all that plays out and what Q's involvement is. I love bringing Q back in this era, when everything has been so deadly serious, to bring back one of the most whimsical character, and yet at the same time one of the most pivotal characters in the history of Star Trek, who we've been discussing quite a bit over the past few weeks in our Next Generation series.
Yeah, I love, like, when they announced that John Delancey was coming back, and I think I've seen John Delancey in he was in like the second season of Breaking Bad. Like, that's the only thing I know John Delancey from. I'm sure he's got this tremendous theater career that nobody has any idea about.
Right.
But like in a lesser actor's hands, Q would not have been what he was, right?
Yeah.
Because like Delancey, he walks that line between just being over the top theatrical and just menacingly sinister.
Yes.
And he does it so well. And so I think, starting Next Generation with him, obviously ending Next Generation with him, and then bringing him back at this point where the trial has never ended. And I heard somebody reference, it feels like season 2 of Star Trek Picard is going to be a season-long version of Tapestry. Just looking at how all these different things, like if you took the road less traveled, like, is this what would have happened if he'd never been stabbed by Noskin, never gotten an artificial heart, and had become a junior grade ensign on the Enterprise? And like, is this that path, or is there some other road that we never got to see? And just the fact that, like, just seeing them back on screen together was just so, and your Admiral Picard used a curse that I won't share on your podcast, but it was so fitting. And Patrick Stewart said it so like GDQ. Like you could feel the anger and just thinking, I've gone 40 years without seeing this fool, and here he is at this moment when I had just kind of got my life back together, and I was maybe about to unpack some stuff with my favorite bartender, and then I died looking at a Borg Queen, and now there's this Joker here. Like, just so perfect and so wonderful.
And his build up to that moment too, when he first hears Q's voice, is like, no,
yes, absolutely.
And we're like, yes.
Yes, the viewing public had these exact opposite responses as Jean-Luc did in that moment, which is fantastic.
Well, and Patrick talked in that Ready Room episode about having moments when he was so caught up, doing scenes with John and just having to remember to get back in character and play his side of the scene because he was so fascinated just watching John work.
Yeah.
Just like going, gosh, he's good.
Yeah. Just like his facial expressions, right?
Yes.
Even just thinking about the scene when he's in the chair in the trial and like he's just talking, and then like he just gives a look where it just goes to sinister just with his eyes.
Raises
and then
that eyebrow and it's over.
His purple mouth, right? Which is really, really weird that he had that. So no fruit punch mouth, thankfully, in the 24th century, which is really, really great. But yeah, just seeing him, seeing Guinan, and it was like when Riker and Troy showed up. But I wonder, like, I think that, like, I saw or I heard somebody reference that, this is the season of Picard that the creators wanted to make, but they had to do the first season before they could get to this spot of right. Captain Picard back out in the stars on a ship, commanding, like in a conference room, asking all of his officers what they think they should do. Like, that's the exact Picard thing. That's what we wanted to see. But they're like, before we got to get there, we have to have sad Picard hanging out on planet Earth who doesn't want to go to the stars. Right, and that was season 1. And now we've got season 2, and they've got season 3 already finished, wrapped up, which is tragic. And that makes me want to cry because we'll be done after 19 more episodes, which is horrible.
Right.
But I just, I'm over the moon for Star Trek Picard. And especially after this, and especially seeing Picard go back in, like, wanting to be in outer space, not being, a recluse and not wanting anything to do with Starfleet. Like, that hurt my heart in the first season. Like, no, like, Picard should be a part of Starfleet. And yeah, Starfleet was shady and they didn't want to help the Romulans, and there's a lot of stuff going on. But just seeing Picard in Starfleet on a starship going to space, that's what I want out of a Picard series.
Yeah, it was pretty great. I love that. It's great to get back to some of these things that we missed, in season 1, to have him and Rafi even back in Starfleet,
I know that made me happy. Like, oh, Rafi's not addicted to drugs anymore. That's so great.
I know, right?
I was so happy about that.
It's so fascinating, and it's so great to see them in that setting, because it feels like we've gone back in time. If you've looked at like the Countdown comics or something, you've seen these characters, in their uniforms and stuff, and it's just like, wow, I feel like we went back in time. And it's great to see that Starfleet has been restored. We got rid of O, and we got rid of some of those influences that were sort of steering Starfleet in the wrong direction, and now we've got Picard back where he belongs. And it's great to see that, because we wanted that. And in season 1 we wanted to see Jean-Luc Picard giving a stirring speech to graduating cadets. It was just wonderful, but it felt kind of earned in a sense, because he's been through something, right? He's been through life and death and life again.
Picard's been through it. Starfleet's been through it.
Yeah.
So I think like it if they'd started with season 2, like, oh, that's weird, 7 of 9's here, but we would have gotten over it. But I think I appreciate more where Picard's at, where Starfleet is at, because of what we experienced in the first season of Picard.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you, it was great to see Guinan again. Did you? I had this experience where I had a hard time. Whoopi has changed so much. Her voice has changed, and I had a hard time tracking with her as Guinan. I had a hard time getting into that. Did you have that same experience?
Yeah, I was like, oh, look, Captain Picard's talking to a host from The View. Like, that's too much. Like, I think you identified something that I felt but didn't really have words to put to it, and I really think it's just her voice is so different. It's just, I mean, she's an older woman, and so her voice is a little more gravelly, and so there was a sing-song nature to Guinan's voice in and in Next Generation. And so it was a little like initially, I think, but then once they sit down and they just start talking about life, then I kind of bought into it, and it was probably at the point where she asked if he wanted the top shelf or the hooch. Like that was really what did it for me. Hopefully I'll have that same question posited to me when I'm at Guinan's bar. Do you want the top shelf or the hooch? Right. We'll see what I get.
Well, I'll tell you, Patrick tweeted that scene out. And I watched it again on Twitter, and I liked it better the second time I saw it. And I think it's because sitting down with, and it's just the fact that people change as they age, and so she's different, and she's different not just in her voice, but in her mannerisms and in her pattern and in her rhythm with Picard. She's not so mysterious like she was on Next Generation, but she's nonetheless insightful. And it's like, oh, this is like what Grandma Guinan is like. That's kind of cool, So
before she's helping him unravel mysteries of the Enterprise C coming through an anomaly in space, and now it's like the real stuff, right? Like she says, she's like, you'll always be my captain, but let's talk about what's going on. Like, what are the things you've never told me in the decades that we've been friends? And the fact that he couldn't tell her even, that was so telling. That huge. These are things that does anybody know what happened in Picard's life to drive him to be so driven? And clearly, like, the outcome has been positive, right? Picard has saved the Federation time and time again, but has he told this to anyone?
Has he told Beverly?
Yeah.
And where is Beverly?
I know. I really hope Gates McFadden shows up.
I do too.
Like, and I hope they don't let us know. Like, right, it was a little bit of a bummer that we all knew Frakes and Marina Sirtis were coming back. So, but if like Beverly just pops up in an episode, because we didn't know that 7 of 9 was coming, did we? Was that a surprise? I forget. That was a long.
No,
time
that was in the like the promotional posters and stuff.
Oh,
we had pictures of 7.
Okay,
and I'm given to understand that in the novels, I need to correct myself, because previously on the show, I had made a point of calling her Annika, because I was like, well, she's human now. She's apart from the Borg. She's making her own life. And I thought I should acknowledge her humanity by calling her Annika. But then I realized that everybody in the show was calling her 7. And I talked with a friend about this, and they told me that in the novels, she has embraced Seven as her name, not Seven of Nine.
Just Seven.
Seven of Nine is the Borg self, and not Annika, because that's a human self that she doesn't connect with. Just Seven. I was like, oh, that's interesting. And you'll notice, like in the novels or in the series, it's interesting to see who calls her Seven of Nine and who calls her Seven. So that's just a little, it's so interesting the way the novel verse and the cinematic universe of Star Trek are interweaving so much more these days. And it's fascinating, not just on the level of, referring back to the novels, from days gone by, which Star Trek now does a lot, but also that the novels and other media are filling in gaps in the stories that we have. And I feel the kind of stories that are being told, like say in season 1 of Picard, are more the kinds of stories that are told in the novels. And I felt like one thing that I've really enjoyed about Picard from season 1 into season 2 is that it's so different from the types of stories that have been told in Star Trek anywhere.
Yeah.
It's just so different. And I've really enjoyed that. I've really enjoyed seeing characters I know in different contexts. And so it's so great when we get a little bit of familiar context in this time, but within this narrative that is much more complex and rooted in character. And I'm really appreciating that a lot.
Yeah, and I think that's just the great thing about this golden era of Star Trek in which we find ourselves, right? Is that Paramount can tell different stories. That, Discovery is the flagship show. It's doing what it is. Picard is this interesting character study of this person that we all love. Strange New Worlds, at least from everything they've said, it's going to be more like the original series, right? More episodic with an overarching, plot line throughout the series, a serialized story, but not to the extent of Discovery and probably not even to the extent of Deep Space Nine. So the fact that we get kind of that, let's go Strange New World. Like I'm very, very excited for Strange New Worlds.
Me too.
I was one of those people I didn't write any letters to Paramount, but I was like, look, you have these actors and they're really, really good. And you made the sets. So why not just do it? And I was clamoring for that on my podcast. I talked about it all the time. Like, just make this show. And when they released that video with Anson Mount and Ethan Peck and Rebecca Romaine announcing it, I was so giddy. I cannot wait. Please have me on to talk about Star Trek Brave New Worlds, because oh my god, Anson Mount was just everything I wanted in a Starfleet captain. Like, after the first season with Jason Isaac, and man, Lorca's not a good guy, because he wasn't. And then with freaking Anson Mount, just so perfect as Captain Pike. Oh my goodness. This isn't a Strange New Worlds episode, but I just
still
like I said when I was on originally, I don't have any other Star Trek friends, so it's kind of like I'm kind of like a hose that you bend at the thing and then you let it go, and all just comes shooting out, because I haven't had anybody to talk to about this. But yeah, I love this episode, this era of Star Trek. We have different stories that we can tell in different formats, and because it's on Paramount Plus, they're not as beholden to ratings and all this stuff, so they can just let them tell this really, really intimate story about Captain Picard, that they can attract Patrick Stewart to come back to a character that he left 25 years ago, because they could say, you can do what you want. You can be an executive producer. You can be in the writer's room. You can tell us the kind of story you want to tell, and we'll tell it with you. Like, that's astounding. And to see what we've gotten out of it so far, I think they made the right call.
Oh, I agree totally. And this season is just shaping up to be something really wonderful. And I love that we can, I don't think we could have jumped into a story like this with these new characters, and had it feel the way it does now that we have a season behind us.
Yeah,
with
absolutely.
these new characters. And I know, there's a sense that this is sort of a soft reboot for the series. That it's kind of taking the series in a new direction, because they could have picked up with the adventures of Picard and crew on the La Sirena. We could have just picked up where we left off, but they didn't. They let a year and a half of time pass. They let, Raffi and Seven's relationship, go this way and that, which we get a little bit of in the audio drama. So I encourage people for that story element. I really encourage people to listen to the audio drama. It really helps inform the conversations that Rafi has with Picard. But even without that, we can still see that things have happened. Just like we see growth in Soji's character and in Dr. Jurati and seeing them in their new space in life. And I love, by the way, Alison Pill is such a gift to the series. I loved her scene at the bar where the guy's kind of hitting on her. And she's like, yeah, I was acquitted of killing my last boyfriend because of alien insanity, you know, but you know, I'm not really dating right now.
Yeah. No, Alison Pill, the fact that, right, I think like she was great in the first season, but she's so much better in this, even in one episode, right? Like she's so tortured, like she murdered her boyfriend. She doesn't know what to do. Like crazy, you know, Asian Vulcan ladies, scary with her sunglasses that like don't go over her ears. That was a weird one, right? But like Alice, like she's so funny, and so there were glimpses of like her neuroticism in the character's neuroticism the first season, but that the writer's like, yeah, just go nuts, this is gonna be great. And she's trashed on the bridge, and like when she climbs underneath the little bar to go over the communication station, I ate that up. It was spectacular.
That's wonderful. I love seeing all that, and it's so great to see people just sort of being people on the bridge of a starship. You know, we not that we didn't have that before, but but we're getting so much more of it now, and that's fascinating. And that being on the bridge reminds me of kind of the big meal deal that we're not talking about, which is the Borg in this
that's
episode.
Right, that happened.
Oh yeah, that's right. It's like it's not all just conversations with old friends. What do you know? But the Borg Queen, like we've never seen her before.
She looks like she's like riding a motorcycle. She looks really awesome.
I know. She's like, wow, you're about to hatch? What's going on? But how did that work for you as it unfolded in the episode? Was it mysterious to you, or did you figure it out pretty quickly?
No, well, I think it was like really early on. I mean, it was in the little teaser right before the credits that we saw her, didn't we?
Well, yeah, we saw that. Well, we didn't. I don't know how much of her we saw, but we did see the. No, we didn't see her. We saw the.
We saw the tentacles stuff, right?
Shooting,
yeah,
you know, and we didn't know what it was specifically. But you know, we see the rift, and it's got like this green tint to it.
Yeah, anytime you see anything green in TNG, I'm like, oh, it's the Borg.
Right.
You know, and they lean so heavily into the Borg last season, and they're very much saying like, you know, you can't separate Captain Picard's story from the Borg. They're so integral to who he is. So yeah, I don't know how quickly I sussed it out, but I wasn't surprised when Seven's like, oh yeah, it's the Borg. And I do think there is the mystery of, I think it is going to be one of those things where something else was happening, that she wasn't trying to take over the fleet or the armada, because she's stunning people, which is what they clearly say, that she's stunning people. Right. And then, so she said she needs power. Does she need power because she was dying in that moment? It's like they lay a lot of breadcrumbs out there. But the one that I was most shocked at is where she says, Picard, look to the star, or look up. It's like, yes, is the Borg Queen his mom? Like, that's the one where I'm like, what are they doing there?
And that's when we go to Q.
Yeah.
You know, because he wakes up and then he's home and then it's Q. And so we're like, oh, okay, what's going on? Because we've seen two different versions of that moment. I love the way, you know, you were talking about not liking opening with the action scene. I actually enjoyed that, because if we'd opened on the vineyard, it would have felt like, you know, like, okay, same song, second verse. You know, that's how we opened season 1. I liked getting us disoriented and then saying, okay, how are we going to get from the vineyard to there in 48 hours? Like that was pretty cool for me. But I also liked the way that scene was recut. The second time we went through it, we saw some of the same shots, and then we saw some of the same events from different angles, and we got a little bit more information, like she's stunning them and stuff like that. And then we saw two different endings to that scene, because in the first version, the computer gets all the way to 0 and we fade to white. In the second version, the computer's counting down and the Borg Queen says, look up. And then it's a dream maybe, or whatever, you know, or it's a Q phenomenon, whatever's going on. So We could spend the whole season unpacking this one moment. Honestly, we could like, now we're with Q, and Q's going to take us on this whole journey, and we're going to go through all this stuff to help Picard make better decisions, so that in this moment, we figure out why the Borg want to be a part of the Federation.
Yeah.
And
yeah, we didn't talk about that their
forward.
Article 15 one. Yeah, no. So maybe it is really just Tapestry over a season, which would be, I don't know. Tapestry is one of my top 5 episodes of the Next Generation. So
it is. It's great.
Let's go for it.
Well, and I'll tell you, we talked very recently about the episode Q Who, which is where Q got us involved with the Borg.
Yeah.
Q is the reason that the Borg showed up as early as they did. So again, we've talked a lot in the TNG series.
Oh, you're forgetting about that really phenomenal episode of Enterprise where they were in Antarctica.
Oh, well, yeah, well, there's that. Okay.
Where Captain Archer looked back at Zephyr Cochrane's speech and is like, oh, there's the aliens coming. Oh, Enterprise.
That's true. Although that was a really well done episode, I thought.
It was. But all the ridiculous retconning they do, right? It was was it an episode of Enterprise where there was a sect of Klingons that were looking more human, just to explain the fact that
yes,
that just let it go, man. It's fine. We do this in the 60s.
That was fun. Although I will say that they did the Ferengi episode perfectly, absolutely perfectly, because they wrote it in such a way that the Ferengi could show up and no one would know they were dealing with the Ferengi, and so nobody knew what happened, and so people thought that they'd never encountered the Ferengi when they actually had, and it was brilliantly done.
Yeah.
But
sorry,
back to this episode. That's okay. So Q is certainly the reason that the Borg entered Picard's life.
Mm-hmm.
And as we've talked about, or I've talked about, I have contended a little bit with Mike on this about Q's motivations and whether some of his arrogance might mask a little bit of guilt, or a little bit of investment in humanity, or a little bit of sympathy for humanity, or different kinds of more sympathetic emotions that might be sort of underneath all that we see, I think, the most glimmers of in All Good Things. And so I'm curious about this all these years later, when Q shows up again. It's to interrupt this clearly momentous encounter with the Borg that in some version of the timeline destroys the Stargazer and ends Picard's life. And Q interrupts that moment.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, possibly. That seems to be what's happening. And does Q feel some responsibility for the way Picard's life has unfolded, and the way that his experience with the Borg has informed his existence? Does Q feel like does he feel some affection for Picard and a desire to rescue him in some way? I don't know. It'll be really interesting to see what this version of Q, as we continue to talk on the show about the development of Q as a character within Next Generation. It'll be really interesting to see what this version of Q is doing.
Yeah, and I think that any way it goes, I think Delancey has played the character so well that I would buy anything. Anything anything that they do with Q, because in some way, doesn't the Q continue and tell him that he's taken too much interest in humanity and too much interest in Picard as it is, and so there's that aspect to it, and so he could genuinely care about Picard. He could also view him as a pet. I like anything they do with it. I'm like, yeah, that makes sense, because they've done such a great job of developing this character and leaving, kind of like you said, there's so much ambiguity in Q's character that I can't wait to see how it's fleshed out over the next 9 episodes.
Yeah. It's I can't believe it's only 9. But yeah,
if it were only 26 episodes like the original, like we talked about last time.
Right.
What did you think about Rios? I was very excited to see him back in command, because I love Rios as a character. I think he's fascinating.
I love Rios. I have to say, Santiago, who plays Rios, impresses the heck out of me. He impresses me the heck out of me more now than he did before, because he also plays the hologram.
Yes, the holograms are great. And that Seven was so mad that they all got combined into one, so she can't get rid of the counseling first. The counseling parts.
That was great. That was great. But the thing is, I'm a native Texan, And so I'm around a good number of Spanish speaking people over the course of my life, and
I live in Southern California, so I share that.
Yeah. So and
my mom is actually fluent in Spanish, and she chose
great.
not to teach me, which I'm still angry about.
Well, and of course Tex-Mex culture and Tex-Mex cuisine and everything are very, very prominent, and there's this sort of blending of cultures in Texas, and so to hear Santiago speak Spanish as that hologram character, his pronunciation and his voice and his accent is so perfect and so beautiful, because like I'm pretty good at speaking Spanish without an accent, without a Texan accent, but he is incredible. But then I saw an interview with him, and his accent actually skews kind of British. And I was like, what? And it just amazes me. I don't know what his background is.
I am looking at his Wikipedia page as you mentioned. He
speaks impeccable Spanish and sounds native, and yet he has this British accent. And I'm just, you're amazing. Okay.
He was born in Venezuela, and it looks like he was educated in London. So that would probably explain how all those. So yeah, he returned to Chile when he was 15.
Definitely, like the Venezuelan kind of Spanish. That's beautiful. So anyway, just that's a small note, but
no, even the Spanish way when he said "dale" for "let's go," like that was
that
was so great, right? We have "dale," we have "go fast," we have "let's fly."
Yes.
I mean, I love all the punch it. So
and
great.
Poor Saru just still can't come up with anything better than execute.
That was such a great scene in that episode. Oh, that was wonderful.
Yep. But anyway, I loved seeing Rios. I love seeing him in the captain's chair. I love seeing that he's sort of resolved that with himself. There's a lot of that where people sort of resolved their conflicts with themselves and with Starfleet. I have to say though, seeing him smoking a cigar on the bridge, I remembered that in the original series, there had been signs put up. I think they were actually put on the sets. It said, no smoking in this area or something like that. And I believe Gene objected to that and was like, no. People don't smoke in the 23rd century. Get that out of here. And so here we are in the 24th century. And I guess, I don't know, culture's taking a few steps back.
Was it ever actually lit up? It just looked like a prop hanging out of his mouth.
Well, like a lot of, you have to relight cigars a lot. So he lit it a couple of times, I think, or started to light it or something.
Maybe he wasn't Borg Queen showed up,
Maybe he wasn't smoking it. Maybe that's a thing. He kind of has this tick where he starts to light it and then he never gets to light it. Maybe that's a thing. I don't know. But that was interesting. But it's so in character for him, and to see him be able to be a captain sort of on his own terms.
Yes.
And still identifiably Rios. And he hasn't put his Rios self away. He's imbued it into his work. And of course that means a lot to me too, because I'm so much about living holistically. And I love the idea of just incorporating that your whole self is valuable. And I'll say certainly within the context of our show, your whole self is valuable to God because you are made the way you are on purpose. And your calling and your work calls for your whole self, and God calls for your whole self exactly as you are. God gets what God wants, and God wants you exactly as you are. And so it's great to see people like Rafi and Rios and even Jean-Luc, who have been sort of hurt by Starfleet and away from Starfleet, much the way many of us have had relationships with church culture, as I've talked about, finding a way to be a part of that, just like, people like me are trying to find a way to be a part of the broader community of the body of Christ, but in a way that preserves ourselves and deepens and grows ourselves. That's a big thing to read into a small moment, but hey, that's kind of my job.
You do it better than anybody else I know, Kevin. I will say that for a fact. But yeah, no, I think right in so there's that longing, right? Like I think I think about my own life as a pastor and seeing friends who have walked away from their faith. Like there's a longing to see them come back home, back into the fold, back into, the loving embrace of the good shepherd. And hopefully the sheep aren't biting, and hopefully there's not there's all sorts of things that could go wrong, right?
Yeah.
As a pastor, sometimes we feel that way, right?
Right. Absolutely.
But like, so like there's a longing, like I've got longings to see people come back to the faith. Like I still love them. I want what's best for them, but like just to come back to the warm embrace of what it means to be in the body of Christ. And so I really felt that. And that's amazing. I felt that for Rios after one season, kind of forgetting what his arc was until I'm like, oh, that's right. He was in Starfleet and then horrible things happened. He left and he was like, much like Picard, like denying it, had his own ship, had his own life, didn't want anything to do. But then to see him in the command uniform with his pips, with his comm badge, like that warmed my heart to see him come back to this thing that, you know, it's Star Trek. We all like the Federation. We like Starfleet when they're doing what they're supposed to do. And so to see him come back, it was like, oh, I'm so happy he was able to make that journey and resolve whatever demon. And like even in his performance, like he wasn't weighed down.
Yes.
Like he was in the first season. Like Cabrera did such a great job of like showing the weight that he was carrying from what he'd experienced of seeing his commanding officer killed or thinking got his commanding officer killed. So, but like he was just free. And that was even after just a recent breakup. Like he just seemed much happier about his life.
Yes.
Well, and I want to see people happy with their life.
Absolutely.
Both in TV and in ministry. Like that's what I'm aiming for.
Yes. And I mean, that's true of pretty much everybody from last season, you know, including Picard. And it's just interesting to me to see how so many of these people were sort of broken and hurt and isolated. And they came together despite their being broken, despite their being hurt, despite their being isolated, many times being forced to be with each other, many times being forced to work together. And as they leaned on each other and as they worked through something together, they all help each other get through that valley, get through that dark time. You know, it's not a magical thing that comes to us from on high if we pray hard enough. It takes work, and it takes work together with other human beings. And that is when you're depressed and lonely and hurt and broken, and you just want to be isolated and lick your wounds for the rest of your life and not go out there where you might get hurt again. Because that's what relationship is. Relationship is risk. And so, you know, taking those steps and seeing that all of these people going through all of the pain and the strife and the difficulty that we saw them go through in the first season have all come to a brighter place in their lives in so many ways, even though they still have struggles. You know, Picard still has his stuff that he's working through and all of that. I'm sure all the characters have, you know, I'm sure Jurati is not, you know, over her stuff. I mean, you know, that was some heavy stuff that she went through last season. You know, it doesn't get much
at least
heavier.
She can drink and make a joke about it now. That's, you know,
well,
that's
there's that. Yeah. but that's the thing. I mean, we do have to, you know, in fact, you even said this on the episode that you were on, you know, that like stuff is going on in the world right now that is horrible and that could dominate our whole sense of self, but that life happens on multiple levels and all kinds of layers and all kinds of things are happening at the same time. And life is still life. And you can have happy parts of your life at the same time that you can also acknowledge and experience tragic parts of your life. And so seeing people grow through that, I just think that's beautiful to watch. And I think it's something we can learn from, that in those spaces where we're isolated and where we're hurt and we're lonely and we're depressed and whatever it is, that the last thing we often want to do is reach out to another person. And maybe you're just kind of reaching out to another person who's just as broken as you are, because we're all going through stuff. But as we reach out and as we connect to others, and as we help others through their stuff, we can then get through our own stuff too. We're here, you know, like U2 says, to carry each other. So I think that's beautiful. And I think that's really going to give some familial linkage that I can already see between these characters in this season. And that's going to be beautiful.
Yeah. Just seeing the way that they came together and that they need each other. And right, it'd be kind of disheartening if they're still just flying around on La Serena and, you know, like they're having space adventures, but they're all kind of in the same place. They didn't really resolve any of the issues that they experienced, but you know, and it's not overnight, right? In time of the series, it was a year and a half or 2 years to get back to that place. And the fact they said like, it doesn't come from on high. Like it could, right? Like God could snap. He doesn't have fingers, but just like, oh yeah, like, hey, you're better. Like all your brokenness is healed and it's great. And you don't have any trauma from that. Like he could do that and he will do that when at the resolution of all things. And that is the day we long for, when every tear is wiped away and there's no more crying. Like that'll be amazing. But until that moment, he promises to walk with us through those dark valleys of the soul. We will go down the valley. We'll come out the other side. It takes time. It takes other people. And yeah, like Kevin said, if, you know, I'm going to be a pastor here, like if that's where you're at, reach out to somebody, like find somebody to hold your hand, because God will hold your hand through that person who walks with you. And that's where we need to lean into other people. And like, right. Like we can see these things in Star Trek because they're real. That's the truth about life. We cannot get through the valley without other people. And so if it takes us seeing, you know, a positronic brain Captain Picard and a Borg implanted Jerry Ryan, like if that's what we need, that's what we need. And we can see it. We can see it.
Right. Absolutely. I agree. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, this has been a great talk, and I'm looking forward to the rest of season 2. And I'm also looking forward to finding out what our trivia answers are.
Oh, so, we're having such a good discussion. I forgot that I totally blew these questions.
Well, let's find out. Okay, we'll insert our answers now in 3, 2, 1. First question. First question, what court-martialed Bajoran came to serve on the Enterprise under Picard? Let's say our answers together.
Ensign Major Kira Nerys.
Oh my God.
Oh no, wait, sorry, my bad. Ensign Rolaren.
Ensign Rolaren. And the answer is, of course, Ensign Rolaren. Yes.
Michelle Forbes was so good in that role.
She was great. And I like, though, that Kira became Kira.
Yeah.
You know, because, you know, she's just, I just like her as a character better. I like Nerys better as a character. And even though Laren was great, she needed to go a different way, and I'm glad she did.
Yeah, it was good.
But yeah.
And then we got Michelle Forbes in Battlestar Galactica, and she was tremendous in that as well.
Yes, that's right. That's right. So question number 2. So we both got that one right. So question number 2, who was the most renowned archaeologist in the Federation in the 24th century?
I know my answer is not right, but it's the only one I could come up with.
You said Vash.
I said Vash.
That's not bad. I said, let's see if you get this reference, Dr. Emil Schofhausen.
I do not get that reference.
Dirty Rotten Scoundrels.
I've never seen that movie.
You got to see that movie. That's a great film.
I know.
That is a classic. Dr. Emil Schofhausen. So clearly I did not know the answer to that one either.
Dr. Henry Jones from Indiana University.
Right. Well, the correct answer to that question is Richard Galen.
Oh, Galen. Now I know the name. That makes sense.
There you go. Yep. He was also Picard's mentor.
Yeah. Okay.
So there you go. Okay. Now, last one. What?
I'm making a mockery of your show, Kevin, with my answers, and I apologize.
Oh, that's okay. We need to occasionally make a mockery of our own show sometimes. All right. The question was, what disease did Barclay have named after him? Now, I answered transporter phobia.
That sounds about right.
Pretty good. Well, why don't you tell us what your answer was, Scott?
I put broccoli fingers. Because his name was Broccoli, and broccoli fingers sounded funny. It's like, oh no, I'm growing tiny trees out of my fingers, and I'm scared of everything, and I'm potentially running into a lot of issues on the holodeck.
Oh my
broccoli
goodness.
Fingers.
Oh my goodness. Well,
what are the rules of consent in creating your crew members on the holodeck?
I don't know.
That is something else.
That is definitely a question for another day, sir. But the answer
just
to the
questionable
question,
anyway. Yeah, what is the answer?
The answer to the trivia question is Barclay's photomorphosis syndrome, whereby a victim would devolve into an animal-like creature. So I'm guessing is that
a Voyager?
No, well,
reference?
I think it's from the TNG episode Genesis, which I avoid. I have only seen that episode like a couple of times, and I hate it so much I don't watch it. It's sadly Gates McFadden's only directorial turn, but I think it may be from that episode. the thing that happens to the crew where they all start devolving into various things, and Deanna's a fish, and Ogawa's an ape, and stuff like that. I think that is what's named after him, because he turned into a spider-faced person. So I don't know. I think that's what it was, and I think it's from that episode. But I don't know, because I like I said, I don't watch that episode very much.
Sounds about right. That's right. There's some.
There you go.
So that is direct evidence that we do not need 26 episodes of Star Trek in a season.
I think it is too. Yeah, that's one of the ones.
That's like that. See, that's why I haven't seen as much. I did not watch season 7 as much because it wasn't in reruns constantly when I was watching
gotcha.
Star Trek.
Mm-hmm.
But also talking about trying to just squeeze the last, they were just racing to that finale. Some of those last episodes in season 7 were, they weren't season 1 bad, but they were kind of maybe a little season 2 bad.
I think some of them were worse than season 1 bad. I really do. But
that's the worst episodes are in season 1. Can we agree on that? The worst episodes of TNG?
I don't know.
Not all of them.
Sub Rosa's really bad.
Everyone always brings that one.
Masks is really bad. Genesis is really bad.
I like Masks. I don't know why.
Hey, Brent is fantastic in Masks, but that's all I can say for it. Brent is fantastic.
It's
but
so
he's
ridiculous.
Always fantastic. I know, it's terrible. But anyway. But hey, we have Picard now, so why worry?
We do.
Well, we are tied 1-1. So I guess we are sharing a very small golden self-sealing stem bolt.
We did so poorly, this one doesn't self-steal. It's just a stem bolt.
You have to seal it yourself.
Yeah.
Oh.
It's a seal it yourself stem bolt, not a self-sealing stem bolt.
There you go. That's right. But that's okay. We did all right. We did 1-1, so that's cool.
I feel for someone who literally wrote the book on Star Trek, I'm happy that I managed to tie you.
Well, I wrote a book on Star Trek. I don't know if I wrote the book.
The book.
I wrote a book.
Definite,
all right.
indefinite. It's all the same. It's all
sure, whatever. Well, while I work on the next the book of Star Trek, what, dear sir, do we have coming up next episode?
On the next episode, we will be reviewing the penultimate episode of Discovery's 4th season, episode number 12, which at the time of recording still does not have a title. And I can't wait to hear what Mike and Kevin, hopefully Mike and Kevin, had to say about it.
Well, I can't wait to say things about it either, and I'm looking forward to that conversation, and I hope everybody at home will join us. And in the meantime, please like, comment, and share. And if you like what you're hearing, please write a review on iTunes or wherever you're listening. Your reviews help more people find out about the show and let us know how we're doing.
Also, send us your feedback and questions. You can find us at Gospel Trek Pod on both Twitter and Instagram, and the Gospel According to Star Trek on Facebook, or just shoot us an email at gospeltrekpodcast@gmail.com. We would love to discuss your question on the show.
And you can support this show by subscribing. You'll get early access to each week's topical episode, plus outtakes and bonus content. Just click the subscribe button wherever you listen.
Do it. I've done it. Seriously. You get great stuff. You get outtakes. You get Kevin's notes. You get it early. You can be the cool kid on the block listening to your Star Trek podcast before everybody else. So click that subscribe button on Anchor FM and support the Gospel According to Star Trek podcast. Do it. Do it.
And with that enthusiastic endorsement from our guest hosts, that's going to wrap it up for this edition of the Gospel According to Star Trek podcast. Thank you so much for being here. And until next time,
I'm Scott Higa.
And I'm Kevin C. Neese. And as Jesus said in John 10:10, live long and prosper. See you next time.